Hello and welcome to my presentation. I am Marissa Mengelcook and I am going to discuss with you today Chelsea Winery's possible product extension. I have analyzed and evaluated a dataset extracted from the Wine Enthusiast website to exhibit and recommend potential business strategies for the future. Here is a little snippet of the topics and research questions I am going to mull through. We will start with the introduction. Here I will touch on the nature of the analysis and the original business problem. I will also discuss the Wine Enthusiast website and the data set that I worked on. I will report on the quality of the website and data pulled, adding in any pertinent information as you, the business owner, should know. I will then move right along into our first and second research questions, which are evaluated using descriptive analysis and comparison. Research question 3 will follow, in which I will display results from an A-B comparison test. And then, after a full discussion of my analysis results, I will give my recommendations to help guide business decisions regarding the possible product extension for the winery. Introduction. Over the past 5 years, Chelsea Winery has been seeing a steady decline in the sale of your Chardonnay, Chardonnay. In hopes of improving the winery's overall revenue, the business can follow through with a couple of different strategies. You can improve sales through public relations on the Wine Enthusiast website or extend the product line by adding a new wine. For the case of this discussion, we are going to expand on the latter. Because our main goal is to increase the winery's overall revenue, we would want to produce the right type of wine that can accomplish just this. To refresh our memories on the Wine Enthusiast company, I have included this slide. They have a website and a catalog that surrounds the wine lifestyle. Each wine that is posted by this company is rated by their editors or professional wine tasters. Only wines that score 80 points or higher are posted. Price is not a factor while scoring. Often, only the balance, length, intensity, and complexity of each wine is evaluated in scores. It is from this website in which we got our data set to conduct our analysis. The data extracted from this website displays a snapshot of the list of rated Washington wines on November 17, 2017. It is important to reiterate that this dataset only contains Washington wines produced in the USA, submitted to Wine Enthusiast for review, that received a minimum of 80 points. The wineries listed are a good snapshot of your competition. It shows us the name of the wineries, their product descriptions, where they discuss different flavors and notes for each wine, prices, which range from $6 to $240, ratings from 80 points to 100 points, wine variety regarding the grapes that were used to make the wines, and the categories of the wine, describing if it was red, a red blend, rosé, white, or a white blend. This category is dependent on the wine variety. There were other extraneous data points that were not super relevant to our analysis, so I excluded them from this discussion. The dataset consisted of 8,646 data entries, represented by N equals 8,646. Each data entry signifies a different wine. The data was not perfect. There were a number of blanks and errors. However, the only blanks that could have affected our analysis were found in the price column. I corrected all other important errors in the dataset, which included spelling mistakes in the wine categories and extra zeros that were added to the point section. Research question 1. Which category of wine has the highest average points? To begin, let's look at our dataset. Here's a snapshot of the distribution of wine categories. 60%, which is more than half of our dataset, are wines that fall into the red category. Despite this, when we take a look at all the categories in regard to average points, we see that the highest average of 90 points is in the red blend category. When we take a deeper look at the red blend category, we see that there's a somewhat right skew because of the large amount of wines rated at 91 points. The middle 50% of red blend wines fall between 88 to 92 points. Because the wine category is based off wine variety, we can interpret this to mean that the grapes used in the red blend category wines score higher in terms of balance, length, intensity, and complexity, in accordance with the Wine Enthusiast grading rubric. Research question 2. Which category of wine has the highest average price? This was another simple comparison question. When you compare all the wine categories with their respective average price, we see again the red blend category with the highest number. I did want to include all the blanks for reference as well. To take a closer look at the prices of red blend categorized wines, I filtered the data into a box and whisker chart, excluding the 9 blanks. This chart is used to show distribution of data into 4 quartiles, while also highlighting the mean and potential outliers. The lines extending from the box in the middle indicate variability outside the upper and lower quartiles. Anything outside of the whiskers is considered an outlier. As you can see, this chart displays a number of outliers, 48 out of the 1,172 data entries in the red blend category. Any wine that is priced above $80 is designated as an outlier. To check to see if there was an impact from these outliers on the category's overall average, I redid the comparison excluding the wines priced above 80 to see if there was a difference. After excluding the outliers, the average price for red blend categorized wines came out to be $38.85. This is $2.64 less than before. However, the red blend category remains to have the highest average price. We can interpret this to mean that the grapes used in the red blended wines impact the wine price more in comparison to the grapes that are used in other categories. Because the wines are priced based on each individual winery, we cannot assume that from this analysis that this means that the grapes themselves are more expensive than the other varieties, but that would be something interesting to research further. Research question 3. Do wines with notes of fruit rate higher in average points and in average price compared to wines without notes of fruit? This question was a bit harder to figure out in comparison to the previous questions. Because there is not a column in our data set that told us specifically if each wine was fruity or not, I had to create my own. Using the descriptions in the product description column, I mined through the text to see if the descriptions mentioned words such as fruity, orange, peachy, cherry, and so on. If the product descriptions contained any of these words, Excel was able to identify them and give them the dummy variable of 1. Dummy variables are just numbers that we give to categorical variables to make them numeric. In this case, fruity wines were designated with a 1 and non-fruity wines were given a 0. Creating this new column with numeric data points will allow us to compare averages for the fruity wines versus non-fruity wines, with regards to points and price. For reference, there were a total of 7,983 fruity wines and 663 non-fruity wines in our dataset. Starting with average points, I created 2 columns, one listing all the points for fruity wines and the other listing all the points for non-fruity wines. N represents the number of wines in each category. The sample mean is the average of all the points for each category. Standard deviation is the measure of variability in the observations. Our confidence level is the measure of how sure we are in our accuracy. The error is what we subtract and add to the average to find our confidence intervals. And the confidence interval is the range in which we are confident that our true population average lies for Washington wines on the Wine Enthusiast website. From this slide alone, we are able to see that fruity wines have a higher average score than non-fruity wines. But we must continue on to see if this difference is significant or meaningful enough to pay attention to when thinking about wine characteristics. From here, I was able to move on to the A/B test, which is just a fancy way to say that we are testing to see if there is a significance difference between the two means. I plugged in the averages in the Excel formula for a t-test to test the differences between two population means. This formula gave us a very low p-value. This value tells us how significant the difference is. Because it is so low, we can interpret this to mean that there is a difference in average points for wines with fruit notes compared to those without fruit notes. When we go back to our data, we can see that the difference in means was 1.06 for fruity wines. This suggests that fruity wines yield a higher average of points compared to non-fruity wines. We can interpret this further to mean that the fruity characteristics allow the wines to score higher, considering the criteria evaluated by wine enthusiast testers. Regarding the average price for fruity wines versus non-fruity wines, we followed the same steps of analysis. I created 2 columns and calculated these statistics. I'd like to point out that the end values for sample sizes are a bit different than those in the previous test. This is because I had to exclude the wines that had blanks for price. After conducting the t-test for average prices, I was able to get the p-value of 0.1. This is much higher than the previous value we calculated for average points. This means that the difference between prices for fruity wines compared to non-fruity wines, which has a value of $1.40, is not significant. We can interpret this to mean that the different characteristics of wine, whether that be hints of fruit or earthy tones, does not have an impact on the prices of wines. Recommendations. Based off of this analysis and discussion surrounding the dataset from Wine Enthusiast, to answer your question of which wine category of wine to produce, I would suggest a red blend wine. Keeping in mind that your business objective is to increase your overall revenue, making a red blended wine might improve these chances, considering that they showcase the highest average score and highest average price. This category of wine has the greatest potential for scoring high points on the Wine Enthusiast website. If we're inferring that the higher scoring wines are those that are more demanded by customers, we can assume that this type of wine aligns with consumer preference. On the other hand, it is important to note that this red blend is created using a different variety of wines than the ones used to produce your Chardonnay. If sourcing another variety of wine is in your business capabilities, then this is the route that I would suggest. I went ahead and included the difference in average points between red blended wines and white wines to be 1.77, just in case you were thinking of submitting your own Chardonnay. This is a clear difference, so it might be worth your while to really go forth with producing a red blended wine. To answer your question of whether or not this new wine should have notes of fruit, I can be confident in suggesting that yes, they should. From our A/B test, we concluded there is a significant difference in points for fruity wines compared to non-fruity wines. If there is no monumental costs in adding these fruit notes, I highly suggest adding them into your wine. This can give your wine an extra point boost, which is what the consumers look at while viewing the wines on the website. Fruity wines have the greatest potential for meeting your business objectives. The next steps that I would suggest for you to take this research and advance your decision making is to go back and review if the company has any restraints on producing a second wine. In the meantime, it would be super beneficial to get more data from this website. As I discussed in the beginning, the data set that we are working with is from 2017. A lot can change in 3 years, especially now since we're currently in a pandemic. We have seen from the news that alcohol sales have been booming, and it would be super beneficial to see if there's been any changes in the types of wines that land on the Wine Enthusiast webpage. Another important statistic that could help you in making a decision is to see if we can pull any consumer trends from this website. Right now, we just have the points and price, but we have no definitive count of sales. Looking at this data, especially over the past couple of years, would enable us to have a better understanding of consumer preference of wine. Thank you for listening, and I hope that I was able to answer your questions and provide guidance in making your next business decisions.